All right. Hey guys, your friend Spencer here. We're going to talk about the marks of a neo-evangelical today. And this is something that's pretty useful when you're trying to see the lay of the land of modern Christianity and what churches are. And most people, they just look at the label and the sign out front and it says, Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, whatever. But there's another dimension to this. There's the modernist, there's the neo-evangelical, and then there's the fundamentalist. Now, a person can be a Presbyterian and be one of three of those things. You could be a modernistic Presbyterian, you could be a neo-evangelical Presbyterian, or you could even be a fundamentalist Presbyterian. And so we want to try to go through all this, and we want you to see our last video on the marks of a modernist. If you haven't watched that one yet, go watch that one. And that will tie into this video as well. We'll try to just explain all this stuff to you. Now, we want to try to delve into this and basically just give an overlay. There's the fundamentalist, neo-evangelical, and the modernist. Now, the end caps are fundamentalists and modernists, and then the hybrid in the middle is the neo-evangelical. Now, a neo-evangelical, which is what today they just knocked the word neo off, and now they're just called evangelicals. These people are not the evangelicals of the past, okay? Like Jonathan Edwards, George Whitefield, the pre-1920 crowd. That's not who these people are. They're not the same thing, and so don't let that terminology fool you. A neo-evangelical is what is being called evangelical today, and that is not the same as the evangelicals pre-1900, okay? And so you need to know that. These are the new evangelicals that we're dealing with today. So how do you identify these people? What are their marks? Well, I'm going to give you 6 of them real quick, and just so you can see this. The first one is, number one, the Neo-Evangelical is orthodox in his theology. He gives the correct answers when it comes to major doctrinal issues like the virgin birth of Christ, inspiration of Scripture, second coming of Christ. And a lot of these men have, through the years, have been great apologists for the truth. They have been men who can articulate correct theology very well. And there's been so many good ones that have been just great preachers. And I put here that a lot of these people are great preachers, great teachers, great authors, okay? So just because a man's a neo-evangelical doesn't mean that you can't get saved listening to them preach, okay? That's not what we're saying here at all. I know many men who've been saved through the preaching of Billy Graham. Billy Graham was basically the poster child of neo-evangelicalism, okay? And we're not saying that they're not saved or that you can't get saved listening to a neo-evangelical. We're not saying that, but we're trying to help you identify the error and the problem with them, and so that you can navigate this whole landscape yourself. So they're orthodox in their theology, but here's the thing, okay? Number 2, a neo-evangelical is modernistic in his methodology, meaning that he's a pragmatist, and he does not accept the bad theology of the modernists, like Joel Osteen's wife says that Jesus Christ was not God until the Spirit of God came upon him at his baptism. Okay, that's a modernistic, heretical view. The neo-evangelical will reject that view and say, no, that's not true, but at the same time, they'll use the methods that those people give us. For example, the classic example is Christian rock and roll. Now, a modernist man named Larry Norman was the inventor and the father, basically, of Christian rock and roll. And so the neo-evangelical will not accept the theological views of Larry Norman, but they'll use his methods, they'll use his style, they'll use his ideas, his concepts. So that's really where they are. They reject the theology, but they accept the pragmatism of the modernist. And so this is where their discernment ends. They understand correct doctrine, but they don't know how to actually put that into practice in a way that is biblical, okay? So that's what a neo-evangelical does. Also, number 3, they also are very conservative politically. Now, here in America, the Republican Party is largely neo-evangelicals. That's why they cater so heavy to what they call the evangelical vote. That's why, you guys like Mike Huckabee and all that kind of stuff that are neo-evangelical guys. The neo-evangelicals, they're on the social issues of today, abortion, gun rights, LGBT, all that stuff. They are on the political right end of the spectrum, okay? You will never find a neo-evangelical who is pro-abortion. You just won't find one. They just don't exist, okay? So that's who these people are. Also, here's the thing about a neo-evangelical that is really the Achilles heel of the neo-evangelical, is that they will fellowship with people who are modernists. And the classic example of that is Casting Crowns. Casting Crowns, if you ask those guys, how do you get saved? I believe with all of my heart, those guys will give you the right answer, okay? Another guys like Tim Tebow. I mean, like if you ask Tim Tebow how to be saved, I'm fairly confident Tim Tebow would give you the correct answer. But the problem with these guys is that they will fellowship with modernists. Now, when I say fellowship, I am not saying that they are trying to witness to them, okay? I'm not saying that they're not trying to help them in the Lord. I'm talking about they are holding hands with them theologically to promote a theological view, preach the gospel, that kind of stuff, okay? Now, that right there is unbiblical. You don't hold hands with Bill Clinton to get people saved. You don't hold hands with Jimmy Carter to get people saved. I mean, that would be like saying, okay, I'm going to have a church service and I want everybody to come. We're going to rent out the local auditorium and we're going to rent out the local stadium, and I'm going to have Marilyn Manson come sing, and then afterwards I'm going to come preach the gospel. Okay, that's not good, okay, because Marilyn Manson would never endorse my message, and really he'd never really even agree to that. And that may be a crazy example, but that's basically what happened. I mean, the Billy Graham Crusade was having Johnny Cash come sing gospel music, and Johnny Cash wasn't even saved at the time. He got saved later on. And so that's what happens with the modernistic people, is that the Neo-Evangelicals will fellowship with the modernists. Another example of that is Ravi Zacharias. Now, Ravi Zacharias, I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to him articulate Orthodox theology and creationism and the existence of God. The man has a tremendous mind. He's an intellectual. He's a very smart man. But the problem with Ravi Zacharias is he'll fellowship with just about anybody. He'll go preach for the Mormons. He'll go preach at the Passion Conference. He'll go preach with John Piper. And John Piper is another Neo-Evangelical guy too. He'll go preach at the Passion Conference, and then he'll go preach with Rick Warren, who is a well-known modernist. There's pictures of him praying with Rick Warren on the internet. And so he fellowships with people that are heretical in their doctrinal positions. And John R. Rice, the famous fundamentalist, always said, a man always goes wrong in his fellowship before he ever goes wrong in his doctrine. And so that is a problem. The Bible says in the book of Romans to mark those who walk contrary and avoid them, meaning that you really should not be holding hands with heretics in order to help the truth of the gospel get out. So that's what the Bible teaches. Now, number 5, a Neo-Evangelical is oftentimes somebody who is on the intellectual side of the spectrum. Okay, the reason a lot of men go from fundamentalism to Neo-Evangelicalism is because there's this inordinate desire there to have some sort of intellectual validity. A lot of Neo-Evangelicals believe the fundamentalists are just dumb. And I hate to just put it blunt like that, but there's really what they think. They think that we're just uneducated bunch of farmers and that kind of stuff, and really that's not true. But oftentimes that desire, that inordinate desire to feed your mind and be educated, oftentimes leads to their compromise, okay? A man can be educated beyond his spirituality. And that happens in a lot of Bible colleges, and really I think that's really what happens with a lot of Neo-Evangelicals, is that they get too smart to just simply do what the Bible says and practice ecclesiastical separation. Their desire to learn more and more and more causes them to reach out to crowds and take in things that are modernistic. And so that's really what happens to a lot of these guys. You got institutions like Liberty University that are Neo-Evangelicals, and some would even say that they're modernistic, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. But intellectualism is oftentimes the means of a man's compromise, because he's looking for something that's smarter than what it is. And lots of times men get educated beyond their own spirituality, and it takes them down the road of compromise. And so that's what happens with these guys. Last thing here, number 6, I want you to know this about Neo-Evangelicalism, is that oftentimes a Neo-Evangelical, the next generation, oftentimes becomes modernistic. And what happens is that these Neo-Evangelicals, because they absolutely refuse to break fellowship with these modernists, they bring them in, they use their Sunday school literature, they use their music, they take their kids to youth conferences where modernistic people are preaching, like the Passion Conference, and they absolutely will not call out the modernist, unless it's some extreme example like the Hillsong and Bethel, that kind of stuff. They won't call them out, and they won't put a wall between them. They won't break fellowship with the modernists. And so oftentimes because of that, the next generation ends up being sympathetic to the modernists, and they end up going that way themselves. And so the truth about a Neo-Evangelical guy is that oftentimes if he takes his church in a Neo-Evangelicalism, his own children and grandchildren will probably end up being infidels. That is just the natural progression of how that works. And I'm not the first guy to say that. There's been hundreds of preachers that have gone before me that have warned about this kind of stuff. Do not go down the road of compromise. And that's really what a Neo-Evangelical is. A Neo-Evangelical is one who believes right but is compromising, and that's really what happens. And so they may not pay the price, and I'm not saying a Neo-Evangelical is an unsaved man. Lots of times they are good men who love the Lord. They just absolutely refuse to separate from modernistic preachers. And that's the problem with those guys. They will not obey God's command to separate from heretics. They won't do it. They believe in an idea more of infiltration. We're going to infiltrate these colleges. We're going to infiltrate the Southern Baptist Convention, and we're going to make it conservative and make it orthodox from the inside. The problem is that once you infiltrate that place like that, it's like Lot going down to Sodom. Lot did not make Sodom better. Sodom made Lot worse. And so a lot of these men, they'll stay in the convention and think, we're conservative, we're going to stay in the convention, and oftentimes they lose their very own children to the modernism that they're trying to destroy. It's not good. And so the best thing and the safest route for you to go is just to be a fundamentalist. Get out of these conventions. Get out of these churches. Quit using this Sunday school literature, okay? A Neo-Evangelical is one that says he will stand for what's true, but he fellowships with those who don't. And that's not good. So hope this video is a blessing to you guys. I want you to subscribe to our channel. We're going to do many more videos just like this. And I want you to help us pray about helping us here. We've got so many good things happening in Kenya and in our ministry here. If you'd like to make a donation, there's a link in the description below. You can make a donation. All that goes to help our ministry in Kenya and maybe do some upgrades here and things like that so we can bring you better content. And so please help us pray about that. That'll be a blessing. And like I said, also subscribe to our channel. And if you would, like this video and feel free to share this anywhere, everywhere you want to, and that'll be good. And we appreciate that so very much. God bless you, friend, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.